Welcome back, everyone. Today we are beginning to look at some of the achievements of the Renaissance. So we've kind of talked about the political context and social context in which the Renaissance took place. And now we're going to turn to some of the achievements. And in particular, we're going to begin by looking at education this week, and we're going to look at learning. So when we turn our attention to learning in the Renaissance, we find that there's a focus on the recovery and dissemination of the learning of the ancient world, the learning of ancient Greece and Rome. And there's this ongoing fascination that's a carryover from the Black Death. There's ongoing fascination with the human person. So in particular, there's an interest in humanistic disciplines. We're going to explore some of these themes as we move forward, looking at this lecture topic of Renaissance learning. We begin again by setting the context, setting the scene, by looking at the medieval period. What are the medieval foundations of learning? Now, we know, of course, that with the fall of the Roman Empire, there's a massive loss in learning, both in the texts that are lost and destroyed, and in the opportunity to learn. So in a far more unstable society, the opportunity to have a formal education is significantly reduced after the fall of the Roman Empire. Now, some medieval institutions preserve some learning from the ancient world. The first institution to do this is the monastery. So monasteries are going to preserve some texts. They're going to preserve literacy, and then this work is going to be expanded by the cathedral schools and then by medieval universities. So what's really important to remember is that this interest in ancient texts doesn't begin with the Renaissance. You can see that it's already present here in the medieval period. There's already an interest in recovering the learning and the wisdom of the past. Now, this manifests itself, first of all, in the recovery of ancient religious texts, writings of the very early leaders of the Christian church, having access to texts of the Bible. These are the books that the leaders of education in medieval Europe are most interested in recovering and preserving. But there's a speculative approach to knowledge here as well. And so this means that this interest in religious texts also spills over into ancient classical authors and other disciplines, including philosophy. From the 12th century onwards in particular, Europeans start to look beyond their continent to other parts of the Roman world. And so we start to see that there's an interest in recovering ancient texts from foreign lands. So the recovery of some of the ancient philosophical texts of the Greek and Roman worlds, those are going to come from Islamic Spain and from the Byzantine Empire, sometimes even from further east than this. And so it's important not to draw too stark of a contrast between medieval learning and Renaissance learning. There are some differences that we're about to talk about, but there are some important continuities. An interest in foreign cultures, an interest in learning from foreign cultures, and an interest in learning and discovering ancient texts. And so these are common themes that we see both in the medieval period and that continue onwards into the Renaissance period. So what does the Renaissance do differently? We still have this focus on the learning of the ancient Greeks and Romans, but the types of subjects that people are studying is changing. And so now increasingly we start to see that people are interested in the study of what we would today call the humanities. There's an interest in the study of literature and the study of history that are simply not present in the way that people are studying during the medieval period. And during the medieval period, people are studying the trivium, the quadrivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, mathematics. They're studying theology, they're studying philosophy, but there's not a whole lot of interest in studying literature and history. And language and rhetoric and the study of foreign languages. These also, there's new interest in these subjects during the Renaissance period. And so some people have suggested that this new interest in the humanities is partly a response to the events that we've been looking at already that are taking place in the 14th century. So disasters like the Black Death, encourage people to want to understand the human experience. They want to know how it was that individuals lived through the Black Death. What was it like? How did human beings experience this? There's also the influence of nominalism. And we've talked about this in the past, this decline in confidence that the universe as human beings perceive it reflects what God intends human beings to know. So people in the medieval period said human beings are rational. God designed the universe in such a way that human beings could reason even to the existence of God himself by looking at the created world. Then the Black Death came along and the 100 Years' War. And instead, you start to see an attitude that says, can you really be sure that the world is, that we are able to understand God and understand the world in this way? And so instead, you have a renewed interest in understanding the human individual. So nominalists are much less sure that they can understand the world, that they can understand God, than people in the medieval period were. But they are sure that they can understand human beings. And so you have this renewed interest in human beings, the imagination of human beings that's displayed through literature, the deeds of human beings in the past through history, how human beings communicate with one another, the study of language and foreign languages, and how human beings interact with one another, the study of ethics. People become more interested in these subjects than they had been before. And this gives rise to an attitude or a movement that's known as humanism, the study of the human person with the goal of forming more virtuous citizens. So the idea is that by reading great literature, by learning the history of the past, you have access to a reservoir of the way human beings respond to, let's say, crisis situations. And so you have a sense of this is the right way to respond in an intense situation. This is the wrong way to respond. Here's how people dealt with these intense situations in the past. And this is what humanism is intended to encourage. The education of a group of people in the community who can appeal to the past, who have a broad understanding of human nature, and so they will be able to respond to the different situations that they encounter in their lives. And so we say that this study of the human person, this renewed interest in understanding the human individual throughout history and literature, combined with the study of ancient texts, comprises together these two initiatives, these two interests comprise the Renaissance. And so what's changing here from the medieval period is this interest in the human person, the human individual. What's not changing is this interest in ancient Rome and ancient Greece. So that remains the same, but now it's kind of being oriented towards the study of human individuals. Okay, we're going to leave this video here, and then I'm going to talk about some of the leaders in promoting humanism in the next video.